Thanks to Project 202 and Toby for organizing. These are fun breakaways from normal everyday life. Second thing is, today is really about expressing some of my own views. I am not actually here on behalf of USAA, so I need to get that out here. My Corp Comm friends will appreciate that. So let's get into it. Before we really talk, so I know that many of the audience are not all designers or design leaders or design background that we have. Research, marketing, technology, other sort of areas of interest here. But I think hopefully this will resonate. It's really about talking to our business friends in general. And so before really talking about design or business, I want to start with another funny word that we hear a lot, and that's innovation. We hear this word day in, day out of our daily lives, and there are several different ways to break down innovation. One way might be incremental versus radical. That's really changing improvements within a given frame or really changing the frame itself. But what we don't really talk about too much is what makes an innovation successful in the market. I think there are all sorts of articles out there that will tell you that here are the conditions you need to have innovation as part of your culture, as part of your organization. But what makes an innovation successful in the market? Back in 2014, a familiar name, Don Norman, wrote a paper with Roberto Brigante, and they were really looking at the differences between radical and incremental innovation. But they have a small little portion in there that says there are 3 conditions that make innovation successful in the market. The conditions are that it has to be novel, it has to be unique, and it has to be adopted. So where do we think the data will tell us that innovation fails in the market? Adoption. Within their paper itself, Radical Innovation, they said that 96% of radical innovation fails simply because users do not adopt these new interactions, these new innovations into their lives. So I just wanted to start there and sort of start with aligning on some expectations of some words. That's going to be a theme that we're going to go through. So design is very on vogue right now. There is no shortage of popular culture, articles writing about the value and importance of design, industries all over the place. There are changing mindsets going on. We see our business leaders using our familiar stickies and Sharpies and all these types of things to change how they problem solve. And there's significant investment. If you look at design as a big D sort of industry perspective, there's significant investment that companies, large and smaller, are making with design, incorporating design into their business practices. So our favorite Venn diagram worked. For about 20 years, we said there has to be a third leg to this stool. That in order to really be innovative, we have to have business, technology, and design meeting in the middle. So congratulations, we've done it. Right? By the way, innovation. There's that funny word again. Right? So businesses are transforming around us. We have, as designers, been invited to the table. So we're now sitting at this illustrious, mythical thing that is the table. Notice all these other functions that are there. Just maybe a little bit different than design or design background. So why am I here? We've done it. We're popular. We've reached the table. Why am I even bothering? Right. So I want to start that conversation by sharing with you some designer perspective on ranking priorities. So is anybody familiar with Kate Aronowitz? So she is with GV, formerly Google Ventures, but she's been a design leader at companies like LinkedIn and others. And about a year ago, she had a talk and wrote an article that said that users or designers should really rank their priorities in this way: user, business, team, self. And boy, did she get feedback from the design community. And on Twitter, she got all sorts of feedback, and a lot of it was similar to this. So Abdus is saying, this needs to be printed and leaflet dropped from airplanes everywhere. Side question, how do we get business to prioritize users? And what this tells me is two things. Designers are still have the gall, really, to believe that we're the only ones prioritizing users. It's false. Do designers speak most to users? Do they really have, or is that maybe the sales or support team? They talk to users every day. So I think what designers have is a different perspective on users. That if you were to say that businesses, if they are remaining in business, don't prioritize users, that's just wrong. What it also tells me is that Abdus is sort of saying, forget about that business part. Business still needs to come to us. We still need to design and work with us. And I'm not so sure that that's really the right approach. So I'll ask a couple rhetorical questions. How do your business partners perceive the value of design in your organization? Are they using sticky notes and Sharpies? Are they incorporating new ways of working? Have any of them gone to D school, done the D thinking stuff? I'm going to guess that some have, and it's been changing. So this value of design is kind of accepted as a reality. I'm going to ask another rhetorical question. How do your business partners value or perceive the value of design work? Resource allocation, budgeting, time that you have to pay people to do work. Is that value still seen in the same way as, say, the value of design itself? And I think that's where we have an opportunity as design leaders, marketing leaders, research leaders. While many companies have invested significantly in design, big D, investment in that design work is still often questioned. How many product owners, scrum masters are out here going like, what? Why do you keep messing with my sprints, right? So I think this comes up to sort of a miscommunication. So this is actually from 2004. This is a recreation of a graphic that Tom Mulhern and Steve Portugal created, where we as design and business leaders use a lot of the same language. We talk about innovation, breakthroughs, disruption, but what we expect and actually mean are still very different. Design comes in and expects everybody to behave differently, work differently, be patient, it'll get there. And the business is going, show me the numbers, show me the project, show me the agenda. I can't see it, right? So it's a misalignment of this conversation with using the same words. So we'll go back to our lovely Venn diagram that we love so much. And another way to frame this is really thinking about viability, feasibility, and desirability. So I think hopefully most of you have sort of seen this perspective as well. Has anybody really looked at these and see that the circles overlap? They overlap. When I look at this Venn diagram, I see that designers should spend about 20% of their time speaking to how the desirable product, how desirability translates and is good for business viability. But we don't really talk about that very often. You can make the same argument for feasibility there too, and vice versa. And what I would argue is that our business partners have already embraced that overlap. Again, they are thinking there is value in design. Popular culture is telling us mindsets are changing, and a lot of investment has been made into bringing design into the organization. So when we think about this table, we as design leaders, market researchers, all non-business leaders, we have to do a better job at articulating the value of our work so that the table understands why they should be paying for us, why they should provide those types of resources. So the most difficult challenge I've had in my career is not designing for users, it's actually designing for my colleagues and stakeholders. I'm going to run back here and just see where we are on time. Okay. So, by the way, hi, I'm Ryan. I haven't introduced myself. I am, yes, the Assistant Vice President of Experience Strategy at USAA currently. But I have a large background in leading and creating design product program teams for companies like Apple, Electronic Arts, Nestle, Comcast. So big enterprise kind of stuff. But I also have a lot of experience in sort of the strategy side as well. So at USAA, my team is a very small team that works on experience strategy. This is another one of these funny words that I think often gets translated to service design. But what we do is we are working with our partners at USAA to ensure that they are looking at market differentiation. So when they bring an experience offering to market, how is their strategy aligning with market differentiation? Our team is actually doing management consulting. So if you think of the McKinseys, the Accentures, the BCGs of the world, rather than take just the business strategy lens, this is just an extension of that management consultancy when it comes to how to win. And we apply both design and business methodologies with the objective really of helping our business partners determine the business viability of their trade-off decisions. So I mentioned a background in CX and UX. So a lot of my thinking, a lot of my perspective is rooted here. Having spent a lot of time at AppleCare and building customer experience organizations at other companies, I think a lot about perceived value. So if you look at these definitions, they come from Forrester. Perceived value that our customers have in their interactions with a company versus UX, the perceived value that users have in their interactions with products and services. So when I started, there was no third leg. We were just another part of the business. And I had to spend a lot of time understanding what everybody else within the business does so that I could communicate with them. I was also surrounded by metrics driving what and how. And it was very early on in my design career where they were asking me, can you calculate the ROI of your work? They weren't talking about how design-friendly or desirable it was. They were simply saying, calculate the time and costs of your work as it pertains to the project. So a lot of my perspective is thinking about this, design experience. I'm just making this up. But the perceived value that my colleagues and stakeholders have in interactions with my team and our work. And that gives me a different lens to then set up an operational structure within the business. So going back to this conversation, articulating how design work fits into business processes is a design problem to solve. We can do this. And it's all about changing what people believe the perceived benefits of design work are. I imagine many of you hear about the costs a lot. You cost a lot. Why do you cost so much? All these types of things. And it's because we're not really calculating the contributions, our contributions back to the business, the benefits of those contributions back. So I'll just skip to the good part, but the key to delivering perceived value is really making those believe what you're offering is beyond their expectation. And right now we have a lot of misalignment around what the expectations of design work should bring. So we need to frame the value of design work to business leaders by framing the value of design through their lenses. Right? So welcome to B School. Or how might we, hi HCD friend, leverage design to develop our business potential? So there's a reason probably many of us did not go and get an MBA. That's all right. We can still learn about it without having to do all that work. So quick, 4-step process. We love our 4-step process. I'm going to talk about embracing business culture first. Culture is a manifestation of process. Culture is not what we say, it's what we do. So how work gets done is the culture. How often do we as design leaders want to just take that on straightforward without actually seeing what that culture is? So I would argue that we should be able to leverage business tools, show adoption of our work, and then use case studies to demonstrate how that moves forward. So business leaders, they're accountable for setting the pace and quality of decision making, bar none. That is what they have to do. Here are some of the lenses upon which they view the world. Economic value, employee value, supplier value, strategic direction, all these different lenses. So I would ask, what do they need buying? We sell a lot of services, but is that what they're actually needing to buy? Another way to frame this is, what am I paying for? So it's up to us to bridge that gap. Start understanding from a business perspective how human insights might actually be referred to as market opportunity on the business side. how the characteristics of a design might actually be related to the operating model of what that looks like. How does this table communicate? I think as a lot of us as design leaders or others, we might bag on the color choices and white spacing in some enterprise decks and balanced scorecards and project updates. Do we actually put on our researcher hat and actually observe how the table communicates, how decisions are made with these documents? I think if you thought of them in a different way, you might have a different perspective. Has anybody seen a balanced scorecard before? Is anybody familiar with what that communicates and what that does in terms of decision making? Is it progress communicated with 3 colors? And can those colors be fudged a bit to look good? Yeah. We're going to get to questions at the end. I am not a. I think it's at the max size of the screen. I will share it as a PDF. Yeah. More than welcome to move forward, too. How does the business determine their models? What sort of frameworks and tools and methodologies do they use to develop their strategies? And how are vendors ensuring accountability, right? So our vendors, this is examples of SLAs that I've used on an internal team to actually make sure that my business partners are respecting our own time. Vendors do this all the time. They have metrics around. We're meeting the SLA, right? So it's same song, new verse. What if we were to communicate with our own version of a balanced scorecard? Or what if we were to communicate with things like SWOT analysis or options, recommendations of paths to move forward rather than one path, and put that accountability back into the business leader's hands to make those trade-off decisions? So we're going to do a little exercise. We're going to take about maybe 3 minutes, just because I'm a little behind. I want to quickly map culture. So if you have paper, you can grab one of those that I've thrown on the table. Has anybody taken an honest look at their business partners and really looked at how much power, influence they might have within the company, and how much interest in your work that they also have? Doing this might allow you to identify some business partners you should be working with more often, and also identifying business partners who maybe you can pass on that work. We can do the exercise if you want. Otherwise, I'm happy to skip through and just give it to you as the PDF. But I'd love you to take 3 minutes just by yourself to map some of the people that you work with, but also map some projects or organizations. Projects that are influential, organizations that are influential within your working environment, to quickly map out who might be a key player. Who am I not working with right now at my company that I should be going to work with because they might have an interest in what we do? So maybe take 3 minutes, and then I'm going to ask everybody to sort of share out a couple insights. Anyone willing to share an insight? Toby, do we have the microphone? Going to grab the microphone. If you do speak, if you don't mind just introducing yourself, who you're with. I will say, please don't share any names or projects or organizations, but maybe just some insights of starting to map this out. You got it? Okay. Nate, did you want to share? Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
So I'm Nate with Camp Gladiator, the UI UX developer there. So I identified that we have kind of 2 people that have power, which would be our VP of marketing and then our CEO. Not so much on the interest side because they have more influence and they do interest in that capacity. We have people that are key players. That's our CTO and our COO that are both on the power side and the interest side. And then on interest side, it looks like more of the kind of the workers, which are the product managers, project managers, designers, and developers.
Cool. So I think I was just chatting with my colleague Aaron. I think Many of us kind of do this in our heads. We kind of have this own map. But have we gone out with our team or our larger organization and make sure we're all on the same page? Because we are all one voice, and we want to make sure that like the advocation of our work is done that. So I think I mentioned this off mic. I would not recommend sharing the results of this publicly because it does speak to culture, but it's an interesting exercise to have with your teams so that everybody kind of gets on the same page of who may be some audiences that we're trying to influence and drive that conversation towards. So let's keep going. Colleagues and stakeholders are human too. I hate that I have to have this slide, but I think for many of us, as designers, we kind of forget this perspective. We advocate for human-centered design, but are we actually considering that our colleagues and stakeholders are also humans? So in this section, it's just remixing your craft. We already have many of the tools, the ways of working to do stuff. We're just maybe not hitting the right segment. So, apply your design traits, apply known frameworks, tell something else. So what are the traits of great designers? We love ambiguity. We love to pivot. We love to be comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. So, why are we so uncomfortable in dealing with our colleagues and stakeholders, right? What jobs do your colleagues and stakeholders need to get done? I know jobs to be done is a fairly popular thing right now. How does the value proposition of the design work that you deliver align with their jobs to be done? How are you speaking to what they need to do every day? What do your colleagues think, feel, say, and do? More specifically, how many of you have ever done a journey map, an empathy map, a diary study, simply observed your colleagues and stakeholders? Right? We know how to do this. I have never had a colleague or stakeholder say, no, I don't want you to sit with me. Usually they're, wow, that's amazing. So we can quickly do this, but I think we're going to skip it. I've left some sheets. We have the value proposition canvas, which I'm hopeful is familiar to many of you. And then we have the AdLib template from Strategizer, both from Strategizer. These are not things that are unique or new. This is well-known stuff. Have we ever actually done value prop work for our colleagues and stakeholders? Looked at the pains and gains, looked what jobs to be done to essentially value prop what the design team or design organization does to fill the gap. Might give you a different perspective. So I'm going to skip this. Now we've entered the scary portion of the talk. I don't know, considering we have a somewhat diverse audience, but for designers this is going to be spooky. We're going to leverage business assumptions. We're going to quantify projected ROIs. And we're going to identify options for the business to take. So this is the math portion of the talk. Desirability really meets viability through numbers. This is when we get to that expectation of proof. Show me the numbers. But it's also a way that we can push accountability back up to our business leaders. So here's a hypothetical scenario, retention. This is a simple mathematical formula to calculate retention. The ROI of retention. So have you ever worked with a business leader who says, we need retention, we need retention? And have you ever asked them, tell me which segment we're hitting, what's the average value of people within those segments, and what's the projected rate versus the current rate of that retention need? Because if you can't calculate any of these numbers, it's going to look really bad when you ask for a lot of money and you can't actually tell your business partner, your business leader who gave you that money, whether it worked. So let's dig in a little bit. So, incremental dollars earned in this simple equation, your cost can't exceed that. That is business viability. So you have a project that potentially can only make $3.8 million. There is no way that you should ever advocate for a $5 million budget. Number of customers in a segment. Behind that is a segment. And I know there's a lot of conversation around Segments versus personas versus archetypes. Segments in this case is the way the business will determine here is a market that we're going to go for because they have average value by product consumption, by service consumption. I don't know that many of our business leader friends actually know which segment they're going to go for. And it's a way for us as design leaders, for one, to associate personas for that particular segment. A segment is typically socioeconomic, demographic type information. And what we want to identify is that there are behaviors, feelings, and actions that we could associate with that. Two different things. But if your business leaders don't have that segment in mind, that's where we as designers can say, look, we can guess too. We'll be happy to come up with some desired behaviors, but in reality, we can't identify them because you don't have a target. This projected rate minus current rate. This is how you can test for business viability. If you're setting up multiple tests, prototypes, to determine which path of desirability to go for, ultimately it's going to come down to, does that desirability, does the adoption of a new interaction translate to that projected rate? Can you show any evidence of that? And lastly, without a base value, we actually can't calculate ROI. I can't tell you how many business leaders I work with that really don't even have these basic numbers. And design always kind of wants to step in gaps of why desirability is important, why behavior is important. But if it doesn't make business sense, you're not going to be in the business of even doing design anymore. So, I mentioned these different tests. There's always a test for do nothing, by the way. Let's just see what happens, right? I think it's on us as design leaders to provide options to pass back up to the business leaders. What are those trade-off decisions they need to make? And math is a good way to show that, especially when you're talking about multi-year return on investment. How many of you work within year-on-year projects that spend about 9 to 10 months getting something to market, and then, whoop, here's the new year, we're going to just start a whole new project and just scrub what we just did? The math will tell you that you're just you're just sunk costs every year. The math will also tell you, hey, business partners, let's go work on performance improvements because our calculations say that we're going to have 280% ROI if we just stick with it for a while. So it's a good way to have some basics of these types of equations. You can Google all this. Forrester has a lot of information too. Lastly, just put everything into a business case. How many design leaders have ever written a business case? Excellent, right? Again, Google this stuff. Write an executive summary. Show the financials of the work, of why your work is important and how it's going to drive business viability, project definition, and project organization. That's how we can then say 13 weeks of work is going to translate into 280% ROI. So investing in design work is a business decision. Business leaders will prioritize design perspectives for users when it's good for business. When it's good for business, the perceived benefits of design work will become the actual business value. Thank you. Formerly known as Project 202, right?
Hi, I'm Mike, head of design at Retail Me Not. I definitely love being able to use equations to help to define what that ROI is and be able to explain, what the expected impact is and, understand whether or not it's something worth doing. I think one of the other kind of elements that maybe not included there, and curious how you handle that, is the other associated costs around design. So it's great if we can find a way to optimize our design process so that it's viable investment in design, but somebody's still got to build it, right? Or
Sure.
It needs to get introduced in the market, and customer service has got to support it. So calculating all those other costs without actually doing the work, how have you kind of negotiated that part of the equation?
So this is largely my role now. So I sit inside of corporate strategy now. USAA has a proprietary model of product or service management. They call it experience ownership. But think of it as experience management. Rather than thinking of, we have products and services, how can we get humans to use those in a desirable way? USAA has transitioned over to humans have needs, how we can get our products and services to fit those needs. But where we come in, say, if bringing an experience to market is how we're going to create differentiation. So if you look at Porter's business strategy stuff, there's two ways to create market, how to win, price or differentiation. So if we're going to say that meeting a human need is how we create differentiation, we work with our business partners that when it comes to an experience strategy, experience is more than just design, right? As Toby mentioned before, that is marketing, technology, support, sales, all these other functions. What we really are sitting there doing is sort of letting the business leaders know that they're actually accountable for the trade-off decision. And if they're not using math, if they're not calculating with the other organizations, they're just guessing, right? So even when running design orgs, I will say we are not accountable for that trade-off decision. We are accountable for making options, and if it takes the business 6 months to make a decision, I'll be patient and happy to wait. So it's really about holding the line, if you will, to say that that is not my accountability. My accountability is desirability. You tell me where you want me to go find desirability. And I think that's always a struggle, especially in large organizations where culture is a thing, where people just sort of pick up and try to fill in the gaps. But if you want to mature an organization to make really data-driven decisions, you have to be mature in saying no as well.